There you go. Hey, everybody, welcome to CWC's Family Connections. I'm here with Pastor Jason tonight, and just going to talk about a little bit about the message that you delivered on Sunday. But overall, before we get into the message specifically, I got to say, you're shedding some light on James in a way that I don't think most people have ever looked at it or read it, and it may be a bit uncomfortable for some people.
I'm sure it is. In fact, it's stuff that I wasn't expecting to encounter either. So.
Well, I guess with that, it's an encouragement to stick with it and really dig into it, because out of that is that growth that we're looking for.
Right.
So tough messages, but ones that God is really wanting to, I think, deliver here. So. Yeah. And to those who listen to us. So digging into it, you started off with chapter 4, so you got to celebrate.
Yep,
new
chapter finally. Took a while, but we're there.
Yeah, and you know, that was a tough chapter, just the first few verses of it. You know, we talk about God residing inside of us. And, you know, we tell everybody when you accept Christ, Christ comes in and takes residence up inside of you, but you really brought out the fact that we allow other things to come in and live with God, and it messes up his house. This is his home, and we mess that up, and we have all of these destructive actions going on within us, and it really does start within us.
Right. James definitely is challenging his readers to be responsible for things that they might not really be thinking of or understand what kind of an impact it has on their life. And so and I mentioned it on Sunday, he has some really strong language in some of these verses, just to try to get his point across how vital it really is for us to be aware of more so how if we are off guard, we basically consume things that are not what he would want for us, and they have an impact, a negative impact. And James wants to make sure his readers know that. Yeah,
I mean, when you mentioned what the meaning of members is, when it mentions that there's warring within your members and so on like that, when James refers to that as really what that means is an extension of a prostitute's body.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, James is using that language in contrast of us being an extension of Christ's body.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to make sure that we understand that without relying on him to live his life, and we live with him and engage in that, that's what it looks like. It looks like a complete betrayal, because we have internalized something that is other than how he wants us to function. And it just, there again, the accountability, the responsibility that James is making sure that we're understanding is pretty intense.
Yeah, it is. You know, in verse 2, you brought up the word amiss and what that really means, too. And it's not just asking with the wrong mindset. It's the idea that it's disease, that there's something, you know, when you mentioned that, I thought of, you know, you tell, when somebody says something, or sometimes you say you got a sick mind.
Yeah. Because that is really the translation. Other than a diseased mind is maybe even a more appropriate, is a sick mind. And you think about, especially cold and flu season, and just not being proactive and allowing, you know, you're not washing your hands, which there again, you even hear this type of language later on in the chapter. You know, he says, wash your hands, you know, you sinners, and that type of language, because it's this idea of making sure that you're proactive, you have these precautions. And if not, you're basically letting germs or viruses in. In a physical point, we can understand that. But in a spiritual point, we realize that once again starts to infect the way we think and the way we interpret certain situations and really just the picture in our mind. And it becomes a sick mind, becomes something that is infected with something other than God himself.
Yeah, and tied into that is this idea of allowing our desires, human desires, be the driving force behind what we think or say or do, and how that's totally a sign of that sort of issue, that we're not letting God be in control.
Right.
There's just...
You got a lot of notes there.
You touched on a lot of things there, but one of the things that you mentioned, I never, it really drove home for me, the relationship between us and God, because you said it was a covenant relationship, a committed relationship, and then you asked a real tough question. It says, "Is that what do we really want that?"
Right.
And I think that was really a key message, or part of that message, because that requires an awful lot of thought. You don't get married to somebody without thinking about it, and is this person, and so on like that. And we ask people, give your life to Christ. And in the passion of the moment or something like that, they'll say yes without understanding what they're committing to and what they're saying. And I think we need to do a better job maybe as a church. And when I say church, I don't mean us, but the church in general, of what that commitment really means.
Right. Yeah, the salvation message to me encompasses that understanding, the depth of, do you know what you're committing to? And on the flip side, too, recognizing that because we have these desires, that God created us with those. And they're not bad, but there is an absolute way that he wants to fulfill those desires. And our human ability, our understanding, our needs or emotions at the time really do drive us in different directions other than what he intended. And yet, I want people to absolutely know, God knows your desires. He created you with them. And yet, when you can walk with him, he will have a perfect way of fulfilling those. You're not going without needs met, and in fact, you're getting them met in the most efficient, healthy manner. And to me, that is just really the most important thing that I want to let people know, is you're not lacking when you come to the Lord. You're not lacking when you make this commitment. You're actually getting the absolute fullness of the best possibilities when it's the Lord with all his resources, all his wisdom, actually creating that scenario for you, that environment for you. But I also mentioned we put ourselves in other environments where, whether it's temptation or there again, our emotions, drive us into compromised situations. And James is really clear. You're not without excuse. You allowed that. And that's just a message that's sometimes really hard for us to accept. But the reality is, we can fake it, we can make excuses, we can try to skirt around the real issues. But the reality is, we allow these things to happen. And you can't just claim ignorance, because the life of Christ is there knocking on the door of your heart to say, I want to open your eyes to these things. But if you ignore me, you're without excuse. I'm there. I can open these things for you. But if you insist on creating these scenarios, you're held just as accountable. So.
Yeah, well, James doesn't cut any corners with that. He says you're enmity with God, and you're actually an enemy of God.
Right.
We're telling God, I ain't interested in what you want for me. I ain't interested in doing it your way.
Right. Yeah, and
you said the word is you hate what he wants to do.
I hate the way God does it. Yeah, that's a language James uses. If you want to have this friendship, even there again, that word is just, we're holding hands, we're embracing, just out of even a friendly manner. But that's drawing you away from him. And the phrase James uses is, you can't just say, well, I'm just, it's not that bad. The phrase is, you're looking back at the Lord and literally slapping him in the face, saying, I hate the way you do this, and I don't want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much stronger you can get with that type of a reality statement. And so we can't ignore, that wasn't my intention.
Right. Your
behavior showed that was indeed your heart's intention, even if it was for just a moment. Mm-hmm. The fact is that you made those choices, and you made it out of that type of a sick mind, or whatever that environment may look like.
Yeah.
So,
well, and again, another word that you brought up there was envy. Mm-hmm. We're the ones who we want to be able to set the standard for what is right. Yep. And wrong, and we're not interested in what God's standards are. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't just apply to things that are bad. It can apply to, as you said, it can be all sorts of things. Good things can be.
Scripture uses the word envy in positive ways too, mm-hmm. because it's a strong desire for excellence. But in this verse that we talked about in James, it's whose excellence are we talking about? And he uses that you're looking for mankind's version of excellence, which is very, very different than God's.
Yeah, well, one of the other points that you brought up that really, I don't think people think this necessarily intentionally in the front of their head, but I think they've got this idea in the background that they can do what they want, and then they expect God to rescue them.
Yeah. Yep, to forgive them or to bail them out.
Yep, I've got my get out of card.
Yeah, it's my credit card. I can just charge up my sins, and then he'll pay the debt, at the end of the month.
Yep.
Yep.
And
it's a dangerous game.
It is.
And there again, I know too many people that come to a religious experience and want to put on the name Christian because they feel like, well, I'll be forgiven eventually, so that can clear my conscience, and then it's as if they're fooling God in some way, which is insanity. So it just, and James is making sure people know that's not working. That's not going to work out well for you.
No.
And he wants people to know that ahead of time. And really, he being this pastor of the Jerusalem church is wanting to warn people. If you're headed that direction, I will do whatever it takes to tell you whatever strong language I need, however I need to get your attention, and tell you you're skating on thin ice. And I do not want that for you. It is not going to turn out well for you. And so as a pastor, I feel that urgency from his words, and it drives the depth of my study, mm-hmm. and it certainly drives the passion for me to speak this out on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember when you're listening to these messages is and James, when he wrote this, it would not have been for the fact of condemnation,
right,
but it would have been for conviction.
Absolutely.
And if you're being convicted of something when you're listening to these messages, that's actually a good thing. Mm-hmm. That is God tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, we can do better here.
Yeah.
And let's work together on this.
Yeah. And there again, he's not demanding perfection, and he's not demanding that, I've got this agenda and I need all these people doing work for me. He is saying, here's what life is. I've created this for your enjoyment, but it comes within these parameters, and I want you to be right here in my presence, experiencing the fullness of life. And in that arena or within those safeguards, then we have that freedom. But when we start trying to climb over the fence and see what's on the other side, grass is always greener over there. We start listening to original things that Satan in the garden said to Adam and Eve. Oh, God's just a killjoy, or he just doesn't want you to have all that you possibly could. There's nothing further than the truth.
Right.
And there again, to fall victim to that type of mentality is a slippery slope, and we start letting certain things become secretive or not taking responsibility for our actions, and we can justify it. Especially, I brought up the situation where if somebody else has wronged me or put me in a spot, well, now I have an excuse to, be lackadaisical in my morals and values. That is not the case at all. In fact, right then and there is even a stronger push for the Lord to demonstrate how humanity would do it one way, and he has a whole new way to do it. And it's the perfect time for us to really engage in that. And that's why James says it in verse 2, consider it pure joy when you go through these things, because it's the ultimate chance for God to demonstrate who he is, not just somewhere out there, but internally, and drive us in the middle of circumstances we certainly wouldn't want.
Yeah, when you were wrapping up there, you mentioned that God's ways aren't our ways, but he does want our best, and he's also protecting his home. And I guess one of the things that I thought would be helpful to people is when you're going to go and do something, or when you're going to go to say something, would you do that if Jesus was right beside you at the moment?
Yeah.
And because the truth of the matter is he's not beside you, he's there with you, right, inside of you.
Yeah.
And you're dragging him wherever you go. You're subjecting him to whatever you think, say, and do.
Right. Yep. And to piggyback on that, that type of a mindset, I actually will bring that up in the next time I preach, because it is a part of humility. And so, as I said at the very end, I gave kind of a homework assignment for those. I intend to preach this as the Christmas message, James 4, verse 6, which talks about God opposing those who have the proud. He gives this grace, and I was studying that this morning, but you have to wait until Christmas to hear what I have to say about that. But he opposes the proud, which I'm trying not to tell you all the definition of that right now, but he gives grace to the humble.
Yep.
And so out of that humility is the mindset of Christ. And Scripture is very clear that that's the mindset he came to demonstrate to all human beings, that this is possible. Inside human flesh, God can completely present his own mindset in this humility. And out of that humility, then that's the foundation. And out of that, we get to see the reality of who we are, who he is, and what these circumstances are.
Yep.
They're temporal, they feel overwhelming, but he has already overcome all of those. And so we don't have to fall victim. And really, humility puts us in that place to be able to see those situations and make a wisdom call that can then produce peace. So humility is a huge portion of that. So at the end of that message on Sunday, I brought up the book Humility by Andrew Murray.
Yep.
And so I had a few copies that I passed out. Really, I only have one more copy, and that's for my research purposes.
Yep, but it's free online.
It is. It's free online, yep. And so I just told people you can go to YouTube and write Andrew Murray Humility audio, and you can listen to the whole thing.
Yep.
Yep, it's free. But I just highly recommend people to to chew on that. You and I have both talked. Like I do that sometimes for my devotions. So I try to read that book at least 4 times a year, so it can set the stage for my study, for how I view things. And you and I have both talked about that. It's so, like, you can only hear about, or you can only read a paragraph at a time, and you have to kind of stop it and go, oh man, that's deep stuff.
It is.
And it's not that I agree 100% with everything he says in that book, but it is just such a key aspect, humility, that that brings us back to where we were in the beginning of chapter 4, to understand, man, without this being the environment in which I live, my mind is getting flooded with other stuff, and it is going to lead me down the wrong path if I'm not actively engaging in Christ's life, living within me.
Yep. So that's going to be on December 26th when you give that message. So
Yeah.
if hopefully you're going to be in the area after Christmas and you can come in and hear that message personally. We'd love to be able to have you come and visit with us. That's, again, on December 26th when you're delivering that message. Now, speaking of Christmas,
Yes.
this Saturday coming up, we have a Christmas gathering here at CWC. We're going to start at 2:30 in the afternoon. We're going to be showing a short video. It's about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it's called The Shepherd. And this is the video that preceded the Chosen series, but it was what sort of kicked it all off and started them into it. So this is open to anybody in the community. We would love to have you come out and visit with us. Again, that's 2:30 in the afternoon until 3:30. We're going to watch the video, and then we're going to just gather and have some light refreshments, get a little bit of conversation in, maybe get to know you a little bit. Just have a time for fellowship. And
So that's Saturday.
That's
this
Saturday.
the 11th.
Yep, and
Okay.
then that's a community event, and then later on that evening at 4:30, we're going to have a CWC family event here. So
5:30.
5:30, sorry, 5:30. Yeah,
Okay. That's why you brought me here, to remind you.
I need correction sometimes,
Yeah.
so
And
that's why I place
can bring
myself
it.
under your great guidance. But anyways, yeah. So that's 5:30 on this Saturday.
This Saturday.
The only other thing I want to remind everybody about is December the 17th. We will be having our worship night here, Friday night worship. As you have said, it's a great thing to see and everything, but there's nothing like being here in person.
Right.
So that is going to be at 7 o'clock right here, December 17th. And as we always end, we're hoping to see you on Sunday morning, live if possible, right here, 10:30 in the morning. If you can't make it, be online, be watching, and be ready for some things to, who knows what's going to happen.
Oh yeah, you're preaching this Sunday, so.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
Okay.
So, anyways, thanks very much for having us in your homes this evening. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday, and God bless. Have a great week.